Now that we know the basic workings of how a commercial production comes together, let's talk about phase one and its involvement for a cinematographer, its involvement for a director, a production company, an agency. We need to know what's happening with all of the different players inside of the game so we can get a better understanding of number one, how we can help. And number two, how we can make ourselves the most easy to deal with, therefore the easiest to hire, because there's so much happening in the initial part of pre-production that it can be overwhelming for even the most experienced production companies. Depending on how much work is going on, there's lots of questions that have to be asked. There's lots of logistics to take care of. There's just lots of balls up in the air that they have to juggle. So the easier we can make it for them in dealing with us, and the easier we can identify situations that may come up that will either add or take away some frustrations that they're having at that it's a unique time because so much is happening, so many decisions have to be made, but it's also not a lot is known. So it's unknown combined with lots of things that have to get done means for a very stressful period. So the more that we can identify that, the easier we're going to be able to onboard in the process. And there's a couple of different very key moments that happen in that phase one of pre-production, or phase one of production, I guess I should say, where we can really, if we leverage our knowledge, we can really make a big impact. So that's what we're going to be looking at in this section. And let me start off by saying this section is a lot like I don't know if you've ever seen the movie with Tom Cruise in it, The Edge of Tomorrow, where he keeps repeating the same thing over and over, a little bit like Groundhog Day. And every time he gets further and further and further, and then he realizes, wait a sec, he's gone down this wrong path that leads to not a good end, and he has to start over and go down a different path. That is what, in my mind, that's what I think of when I think of the pre-production process, and especially phase one of the pre-production process, because although you know what's going to happen, you can only chisel away a little bit, and there's always things that could come up that could lead you down another path. And it's just not about finding the perfect way through phase one of pre-production, but just about finding a way that works for you, and understanding that it's a process and you're going to get better as you go along. But the main thing is to try some things, to go out on limbs, to try variations of things, when you can be helpful, when not to, how to deal with rates. We're going to talk about that, negotiating, talk about trying to get crew members on, how to do it, when to do it, why to do it. There are so many variables that go into this that there's lots of room for experimentation and lots of room to improve on your workflow and see how that affects the final product, how that affects the production, how that affects the shoot, your happiness within that, your chance for employment in the future. All of those things can be experimented with inside of this process. So the big 6 key moments that we're going to be talking about in this section of the course is the initial contact. That's number 1, initial contact. Number 2 is the initial conversation with the director or the producer about the project, right? Those are usually 2 separate things. Sometimes they're combined. And like a lot of the things that we're going to talk about here, it's not always written in stone. This is the way that it's going to go. But the longer that you're in the game, the more you'll start to recognize that these 6 things make up a big area of pre-production. And they're probably happening simultaneously. A lot of the times there will be sections for, okay, you may get that initial contact, and then for a while you won't get that initial conversation with the director or the producer. But some of these other things may be going on at the same time, so they're overlapping. So although there's 6 different areas, they don't follow a linear structure or a linear pattern. These could be going on concurrently, and do so on a lot of the productions that you'll find yourself on. So there's initial contact, then there's initial conversation, then there is research on your part, there is getting yourself over the hill with agency or client, so winning them, which is also part of the initial pre-production run. There is negotiating rates, and finally, there is the actual prep for the job. So those are the key areas inside of the pre-production phase.